Anastasia Arendse is in the parliamentary precinct this afternoon. Let's cross to her now. Very good afternoon to you, Anastasia. What are we expecting to hear this afternoon?
Good afternoon, Zinga. And I suppose it's quite interesting that you started off your introduction in the previous package talking about those rolling blackouts or load shedding or whatever you want to describe it as. And it is under this context that Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana has to try and let investors know, or at least try and convince them that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, given the kind of context that we're in. But to unpack what we can expect from the minister, what some of the issues that are hovering around from an economic point of view, we are joined by Professor Deborah Tickle from SAICA. Prof, thank you so much for your time. Let's, for the context of South Africans, differentiate between the medium-term budget policy speech versus the actual February budget announcement.
Okay, thank you, Natasha. So the February announcement is generally an announcement of what taxes are going to be collected for the future year and then what expenditure there will be for the future year. When we get to now, which is now November, 3 months before the next budget speech, we look at where we are for the year insofar as what we've collected, and we are expecting more than we expected, and what we've spent, and what we need to be doing from a policy perspective going forward. In fact, the first time that Minister Manuel did this particular medium-term budget speech in 1997, that was exactly his objective, was to explain what the strategy of the government was going forward, so that when we got to February, we would have the income and the expenditure covering that.
So based on that, then, when you look at February and now, what kind of economic context are we coming into when we're about to, hear this medium-term budget policy speech at 2 p.m.?
Okay, so number one, we have to remember we have a new Minister of Finance. So the first thing we will expect to see is he going to continue on the same path as the Minister Tito Mboweni, or is he going to take a new path? So far, he's illustrated or demonstrated that he is going to continue on a stable fiscal path, which is encouraging. He will be looking at where we are, as I said. In February 2020, what we have to remember is that we were coming out of a second wave of COVID and going into or forward to a third wave. It was very uncertain. We didn't know what was happening with the economy, and the budget was extremely conservative. So conservative that the amount we budgeted to collect, for example, was the same as in 2020. So for 2022, we were budgeting the same as 2020, 2 years before. So really, we weren't increasing anything. We were just standing still. And what we will see now is that, yes, we might have overcollected, but we have to be very careful with this. Whatever the figure is, people say between 100 and 150 billion. This is not a windfall, it's merely a catching up, and we have to be very, very careful in how we spend it. And we want to hear from him what the proposal is from the government with A, the money that's not been spent, and B, this extra windfall, and how we're going to go into the future. Are we going to continue controlling debt? Are we going to be controlling spending? Or are we going to have a party? Because my view is that we can spend to the end, meaning we just spend on current expenditure, or we can spend on infrastructure, and we can build this country and create a better country for all.
On that spending, and it's a good thing that you touched on it, I was going to ask you, seeing that we've got this windfall, how would it be more prudent to spend it? Is it infrastructure, or is it paying off debt?
Well, either of those would be good. We spend over almost 300 billion rand a year on interest, which is a significant figure. It works out to 4,500 rand per person on interest that we spend. So if we can bring down debt, that would be good. But that's not necessarily going to grow the country. It will simply show fiscal stability. If we can spend on infrastructure, then we will be building, we will be creating jobs, and we will have a future country which is better than the country before. We've seen what's happening now with Eskom because we haven't spent sufficiently on infrastructure. There will be other areas that we need to spend on. So infrastructure is good, but we have to have the money to spend on that. So there's going to be a very careful balancing act that's going to have to be played by the minister, both now and in February and going forward.
Prof, thank you so much for your time. That is Professor Deborah Tickle from SAICA, mentioning that it is exactly what it is, a tough balancing act between capital expenditure, which we kind of need to get involved in, but also dealing with the context of the high debt costs. And I know investors are going to be looking out for various key metrics which credit rating agencies find interesting as well. So for now, I'm going to cross to my colleague who's also at the parliamentary precinct, that is Bulelani Philip.